Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Inside Scoop, Ion Ivy's podcast series that provides direct insight into the world of college applications and profile building. My name is Shanza Khan, and I'm the founder and head counselor at Ion Ivy. Joining me today are two ambitious and driven guests. One is Anum Azhar. Having graduated from TNS Beaconhouse, Anum has been working with us for 4 years now and is heading to Brown University to pursue her dream of being an architect. Our other guest, Fatima Nasser, a recent graduate from the Lahore American School, will be attending the University of Toronto and plans to major in environment and sustainability. Now, a teacher recommendation or employee recommendation, creative or analytical graded assignments. Stay tuned to find out more in this episode of the Inside Scoop. So, welcome on board, guys. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Let me begin with you, Fatma. And since this episode is all about LORs and transcripts, we'll be diving deep into all the nitty-gritties. Let's begin with the very basic question. When should I request an LOR?
I started requesting mine actually at the end of 11th grade. I started finding teachers who I felt would write good ones for me. And then they officially wrote them, I think, in around September, October, right before I had to submit them my applications. But I recommend asking for them in your junior year. So when you go to them in senior year, they know that, okay, they already asked us and they're ready to write one for you because there's a lot of other students there and you want to beat them to it.
I think that's an excellent point, Fatma, that you asked in advance, and you're very right. I think when teachers get overwhelmed with being asked to write letter of recommendations at the nth hour, they're not going to be doing you justice. And particularly when you apply to Canadian universities, you don't have too much room to showcase all your assignments and accomplishments. So the LOR plays a very, very important role in that. So guys, a very good tip, please ask in advance. Anum, who should I be asking my LORs from? Who did you ask?
So I feel like LOR is first and foremost the biggest criteria that the person you're asking an LOR for should be the fact that they should know you well, not just to say, oh, she's a good student, but also why do you think she wants to pursue what you're doing, or why are you driven, or specific examples of where you showed characteristics that the college cares about. So that could be one approach. Or another approach is asking teachers that are relevant to the major that you intend to pursue. So I was going to pursue architecture. I asked my physics teacher for one. There was another teacher who was known to have written really good LORs in the previous years. So I used my senior's experience with her letters of recommendation and asked her for one as well. And I think one of the other reasons I chose my physics teacher was because that was that class that I did actually struggle with. That he was able to see that I persevered and I was committed. Because I feel like all teachers, if writing a letter of recommendation, would say that like she works hard or this is a good student. But I feel like he was really able to tell that story of how I found the subject difficult and how I overcame that. So I think just any teacher who really knows you that well, I feel like.
Did either one of you ask for any LORs from apart from your teachers, Anum?
Yeah, so I asked one from one of my really close friends, a peer recommendation, and I think that showed a side of me that was not really highlighted anywhere else in my application, because I feel like everything else highlighted the like work ethic or persistence or commitment, but I feel like the peer recommendation highlighted me in other aspects of my life, such as what kind of a friend I am or what kind of a peer I am. And other than that, I did also submit a letter of recommendation from one of the places I interned at. I interned at the Wall City of Lahore, so I got one from my supervisor there. So yeah, I think just a range of different people who can comment on different parts of your life, like sort of a holistic picture of you, I feel like.
Fatma, did you need to do that for Canada as well? Did you have teacher recommendations or did you have external recommendations as well? What does Canada require? You're going to the best university, University of Toronto, and just for the audience's information, Fatma got into all the top tier Canadian universities. So Fatma, for Canada, can you just share with our audience, do you just need academic LORs or did you use any others as well?
Well, actually, I didn't need any LORs I only needed it for one university, for University of British Columbia. They asked for LORs from teachers. Other than that, all Ontario universities, nobody asked for them, so I didn't really need them.
So only UBC, University of British Columbia was the only university which required an LOR in Canada.
Yep.
And did you ask it from a teacher or a counselor?
I asked one of my teachers and I also asked my MUN instructor.
Okay,
Yeah.
so once again, to highlight the part that you're very strong in debating, so you asked your MUN coach to give you a recommendation.
And at the time I wanted to
So,
major in political science, so I thought it'd be beneficial if she wrote one for me.
no, absolutely. I think tying in your recommendations from whatever you've been doing, with if you're good in your extracurriculars like debating, and tying that up with the major you're applying for, like political science, or in Anum's case, interning at the Ball City Lahore Authority, and then if you're applying for an architecture major, that just, I think, strengthens that further. Anum, can you speak a little bit about how much do you think LORs matter?
So obviously I have not sat behind the admissions table or anything. I would not know the specifics, but I feel like LORs won't matter as much as like the major components like grades and extracurriculars and all of that. But I think the fact that it's coming from someone else, it provides sort of context to your application. It makes sort of the admission officer view you as a person rather than just an application with XYZ grades and XYZ extracurriculars. So I feel like in that sense, being able to show different parts of you, not just through the essays, but also through the letters of recommendation is important. I think it can really add to your application.
So for our audience who's tuning in today, a couple of takeaways on LORs before we move on to transcripts. When you ask for an LOR from a teacher or even from a MUN instructor or a place where you interned, we at Ion Ivy strongly recommend that you should share a copy of your CV with your teacher, counselor, instructor. So because they only know you from what you may have done in their class or what you may have done in their camp. If you were taking a physics recommendation from a teacher, they may not know that you participated in physics competitions. And so you should take out those 5-10 extra minutes to share a CV with them and just walk them through what else have you done in that particular field to get that recommendation from them. The other, I want to touch on a comment that Fatma made earlier, is asking a recommendation early. It is unfortunately a bad practice that many teachers engage in, what I call the CCP model, cut, copy, paste. They write a generic letter of recommendation, and then they simply change the name or the course that a student is applying for. You really need a personalized recommendation. And so you should be on sufficient good terms with the person you're asking that recommendation for them to put the time and effort in drafting it. So going to Fatma's point, please do apply early. Moving on to the second part of our podcast today, transcripts. Anum, let's begin with you. For the US, which transcripts is my school required to send in?
So the US, practically all the colleges will ask you for a high school transcript, which is essentially 9th through 12th grade. And then once you've submitted your applications, for example, if you submit in the early round, then they'll ask you for a mid-year transcript in December and then a final transcript in June. Like I still have to submit my final transcript when it comes out to ground. So they will want to see that you've kept up your grades. But the short answer to this is 9 through 12, all of those grades matter.
And Fatma, is that the same for what you needed to do for Canada?
Yeah, it is the same, 9 through 12, but I've heard they put more weightage on 11 and 12 grades.
Okay, so for our listeners tuning in, please note, particularly for the USA, we're going to break this down a little bit by country. Your entire high school transcript is going to go in, including your midterms and finals, and it will be converted into a GPA. So for those procrastinators who were like, oh, internal grades don't matter, we'll just work hard in our OA levels or MYP, DP, or the American school system do have to, students still have to perform in their finals. Know that your grades throughout are going to go. So you really can't mess up and say, okay, I'm going to deliver at the end. For Canada, as well as for the UK, there is more emphasis on the more recent years. So not as much emphasis on 9th and 10th, but much more on 11th. For UK, it's the same thing. Note that offers in Canada, as well as in the UK, are conditional. So Fatma, I believe you also have to deliver on your final transcript in order to meet your offer. Is that true for all Canadian universities?
Yeah, it's true. Some universities gave me a specific percentage, like Western, for example, said I needed an 83% average in order to keep my admission, but U of T, UBC, they both said just maintain your grades. But yeah, it is conditional. So if I don't maintain my grades, they can easily withdraw my offer.
So a lot more pressure for Canadian and UK applicants. Anum, I don't think that's the case with you in the US, right?
No, there's no condition.
No pressure for US applicants. Once they get their offer, they're pretty much in. So that may be something that our listeners will consider as they're applying to colleges. Fatma, if you can expand a little bit on how does a school actually generate transcripts? Because I know you ended up working very closely with your school counselor. Sometimes, sometimes mistakes happen, and you were keeping a very, very close watch on the entire process. So let's break it down for our listeners. When you're filling out a Canadian application, you upload everything from the student's end. And it tells you that the school is supposed to generate your transcript. How did you take it from there?
Well, for some universities, they let my counselor do it. There's this thing called parchment, which all Ontario schools use. So the counselor has to send it through parchment, and then parchment sends it to universities. But I remember for schools like McGill, they wanted me to submit it, and obviously my counselor wasn't allowed to show me. So what we had to do about that is he had to get permission from the school, and their approval allowed them to show me so I could submit it. So they eventually approved, and then I did send it myself to them. But I was keeping a close eye on it because I had a bad experience before, and he messed up a little bit. So after that, every time I had to submit a transcript, I made sure I sat there with him and I watched him send it, because one little mistake can compromise chances of admission. So I didn't want that to happen again.
Yes. So, there are actually some important takeaways from the process you just spoke about. And one, frankly, that I don't really understand, which is the general rule that most schools have, including your school, Fatma, that students are not allowed to have a copy of their transcripts. Which I can tell you that it's not the practice in the US, it is the practice in Pakistan. So for institutions like McGill, which said that you need to upload the transcript, you first had to get clearance from above the school counselor, correct?
Yeah.
So guys, this is something for those of you who are tuning in, the process for Canadian universities really varies from university to university. Some will require the counselor to email them the documents. Others will require them to give it to a third party like Parchment. And yet others like Miguel will ask you, the student, to upload it. So when you, the student, have to upload it, and you listeners in Pakistan are not allowed to have a copy of your transcript, you have to approach first your school counselor, who then needs authorization from somebody higher in the management to get hold of that particular transcript. And so, there is always the possibility of human error, as Fatma mentioned, that she had the opportunity to sit with her school counselor and see that the correct transcripts were being sent. Anum, did you have a chance to do the same for the US? Explain to us how the transcript process works and what did you do to mitigate the possibilities of any error.
Right. So our school does actually, we do have access to a copy of our transcripts, but like our grade stuff, but the transcript that we received from the school was not actually in the format that was required on the Common App and for US colleges. So I was on pretty good terms with my college counselor. I would recommend all people stay on good terms with their counselor. And I was also able to sit with her while she uploaded my documents. And there was also some, like we had to upload some optional things because I'd done the MYP and I'd given 2 exams of my DP earlier as well. So those official transcripts also had to be uploaded. So I did go through all the guidelines first myself before sitting down with her, just to make sure that we didn't miss out on anything. It's so crucial. It's such a crucial part of your application. I definitely do think you should sit down before and figure out what exactly you have to submit in what format.
What I want to highlight to our listeners today is the agency and initiative taken by both of you to work with your counselors in order to get the job done. I think many students just think that I've requested my counselor, I've requested my teacher, my job's done, it's over. But whether it's asking your teacher for an LOR, giving them the details for a CV, or whether it's working with your counselor to make sure that they've, dotted the I's and crossed all the T's, you have to make that extra effort to get into the top universities, just like Anum and Fatma have. Related to the Common App, Anum, so this one is in your purview. What else goes on to the Common App transcript from the counselor's side, in addition to the LOR? So in some instances, I know that the counselor is asked questions and to rate students. Do you have any voice in that, or just left to the counselor?
I didn't know there were going to be questions about me, so I was sitting with my counselor while she was submitting out this form, because I was essentially sending her the documents that she had to submit. And those did come up, and as I said, once again, I had a pretty good relationship with my counselor. So she did put either like the full rating or like one below for practically all of them. They asked for like skills, empathy, hardworking, like basic attributes you would expect in a student applying to a top tier school. I'm not sure how much those questions impact your admission chances, but my counselor, in my experience, did rate me pretty high for most of the attributes listed there.
So I think what most students don't realize, that in addition to the counselor recommendation, your school counselor also has to rate each student on various rubrics. It's on the academic rubric, how do you stand as against the rest of the class? And it's also on a character rubric that Anum is highlighting, how empathetic is she? How kind is she? What kind of leadership qualities she has? So I think going to the points of both Anum and Fatma, having a good relationship with your school counselor is really going to be essential as when during this entire application process, because your school counselor is the one you're going to be asking for the transcripts, the ratings, the counselor recommendation, which is a required document. That's one recommendation that your counselor has to write. You don't have the option of selecting which teacher is going to give it to you, that your counselor has to write your recommendation. So for everyone who's tuning in today, please make sure you have a great relationship with your counselor and get to really know them. Go drop by their office, spend time with them. Anum, how do graded assignments, did they play any role in your applications? Did you submit any?
Graded applications are not part of the Common App, like it's not something that goes to every college. There were certain colleges that did ask me for a graded assignment. I believe Princeton does, Amherst does, and those are, I'm pretty sure, optional as well. But anything that was on my college app that said optional, I didn't really take it as optional. I did submit something. And for me, the IB system does have an essay that you have to submit. It's an extended essay. It's a full research paper. You write it over the course of 2 years. So I ended up submitting that just because it was related to architecture, the major I was going to pursue, and also I had worked a lot on it. Like it was a good sort of representation of my research and communication skills. But I wouldn't say graded assignments are necessary for the US application, mostly because most colleges don't ask.
Fatma, did you have to submit any graded assignments? Were you given the option to submit any graded assignments?
No, I've never even heard of that actually. Canadian
Okay.
applications didn't ask me for anything graded.
Graded assignments, listeners, are essentially an optional requirement, mostly asked by highly selective US universities. And for those of you who are not in the IB system and are doing O levels, which most of the students in Pakistan are, then your global perspectives class often requires you to write a research paper. That's usually a good graded assignment to submit, provided you got an A or A star. So, if you don't have a high enough grade for that graded assignment, you may want to rethink about maybe using something from some other class. But generally speaking, the GP is a good assignment to use. So Anum, how did you choose the assignments that you wanted to send in with your application? I know you mentioned that the extended essay was something that you submitted to the selective universities like Princeton and Amherst, but was your extended essay connected with your intended major? Was it not?
Right. So my extended essay was related to like the British impact on Pakistani Indian culture, all of that. So it wasn't directly connected to architecture, but I had talked about how it had impacted the architecture of these countries, like of the subcontinent. So it was connected to my major, but even more than that, the EE actually has a very specific rubric, and my supervisor had very specific comments on it because it's an assignment that the student has to complete with the support of the supervisor. So I felt like that would be a good fit because for other assignments, they do ask you to upload the rubric that was marked on with it. So for the other assignments, there wasn't really any set, like there were guidelines, but there weren't like this, you'll get this mark band if you do this, and you'll get this mark band if you do that. But for the E, that was there. So I felt like it made a lot of sense for me to put something that I'd spent a lot of time on and that met the exact criteria that the college was asking.
Okay, that's very helpful for everyone to know. And I think oftentimes they give you an option that if you don't want to submit a graded assignment, you can upload another piece of work in lieu of that, I believe, right? But that, of course, entails a lot more work on the student's behalf. So I frankly don't have many students who took that option. Thank you so much, Anum and Fatma, for being with us here today and sharing your experiences with our listeners. I'm sure it will be very beneficial to everyone who is tuning in and hearing your experiences and hearing your words of wisdom. Thank you so very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Ms. Shanza. Bye.
Have fun in Toronto and USA, guys. Bye.